Hey there, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Hope everybody's having a good day in very, very trying times. We are about to be joined by Dr. Cornel West, independent candidate for president. We just finished covering a protest outside of Columbia University calling for a ceasefire. If you don't know, Columbia has suspended two student groups that have been leading protests on behalf pro-Palestinian protests and demanding a ceasefire. Columbia joins other universities that have been suspending and frankly censoring these types of student groups. So we'll talk about that. We'll also get into obviously the 2024 election. Welcome in, Dr. West. How you doing?
Oh, my brother, it's always a blessing to talk to you. I salute your magnificent work, you and your team there in Detroit. Man, that UAW coverage was superb, though, brother. It was good to be with you as well. And I can see your back is in good shape. You finished this marvelous book on Flint so that even in these grim times, you are still on fire. And that's a beautiful thing. And Brother Colin, too. Brother Colin, too.
Yep, I appreciate that. Obviously, we'll get into the election, but I want to start with obviously the horrible, horrific scenes out of Gaza. You've been outspoken on this for decades, so you're not new to this. Obviously, yesterday was a pretty massive pro-Israel rally. They say a couple 100,000 people were there. Some questionable speakers, if you ask me, were also there.
Absolutely.
And the president you're running against has clearly been twisting himself into a human pretzel to keep America as a compliant ally of its outpost in the Middle East, while also trying to give off the impression that he cares about, at this point, well over 12,000 innocent deaths in Gaza. I want to first show you this clip because it really stood out to me. We covered a protest the other night where parents brought their children in support of a ceasefire, in support of the Palestinians. And two speakers really moved me, and I wanted to get your response to it. Let's take a listen.
Can you tell me what brings you out here today?
We're witnessing a genocide with our tax-funded dollars, and I don't want him growing up in a world thinking that we can idly stand by while we're complicit in murder. And I reject the idea that, women and children, men too. But what's especially appalling, and all people, what's especially appalling is the number of children and babies that have been murdered by our taxpayer money, our money. And we don't have money for daycare, universal child care, but we have money to murder people in a white supremacist, bloodthirsty desire for a land grab.
And why is it important that the children come out today?
It's their future. It's their present. It's their siblings. We have on this the name of a young person who was under the age of 1 who was murdered by Israel. He's 10 months. He was 10 months. How does the world not end for a parent losing their child?
These images are really nothing new. There have been images of children dying under Israeli and American bombs my whole life, and something has to change. The killing has to stop. It's not okay that these are normalized images and normalized realities. I mean, they're more than images, right? And I was a child in war, and I know exactly the terror that children feel. I'm not American, and it's the first time that I'm actually experiencing this kind of aggression from afar. Usually I'm much closer to the action. So it's the least I can do to stand with people who actually, would like to see the end of this atrocity.
And I know we're going to be marching over to Chuck Schumer's house.
Yeah.
What would be your message to Chuck Schumer?
Well, I mean, my message to the American establishment, as always, is to stop funding the killing of children around the world, not only in Palestine.
I'd like to ask you, I mean, I put my cards on the table. My wife's Israeli. She's got family in Israel. I come from my father might as well be the prime minister of Israel. Quite the Zionist. I love him, but there's certainly a lot we don't agree on. But I got to say, I mean, we've seen statements from America condemning Russia's bombing of hospitals in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, killing, targeting innocent civilian infrastructure. They sure seem to be quiet about the same exact thing going on in Gaza.
Yeah, no, you're right, though. You know, brother, these are the kind of times that test all of our souls, oh man, because it's so hard to keep a sense of humanity, a sense of morality, a sense of spirituality in an overwhelming moment of barbarity. Barbarity has a way of not just polarizing, but it has a way of creating such a radical divide between us and them that it's almost as if there's not a human continuum. You see that, when you see the IDF gangsters talking about these are animals. Well, animals actually don't engage in gratuitous violence. Animals really don't kill 4,700 babies in 2 months. So it's almost as if we're animals with language who are more barbaric than the tigers and the lions and so forth. But at the same time, you want to try to tell the truth. And in telling the truth, you've got genocide and you just have to make a choice. You really do have to make a choice. If Biden chooses genocide, if Harris chooses genocide, if the Democratic Party chooses genocide, if neoliberal leadership enables and promotes genocide, and you have to call it for what it is. Now, I believe, of course, that the killing of an innocent life, no matter what color, just like the sister that we just heard, that's a war crime. It's war crimes, it's crimes against humanity, it's crimes of genocide. And so you call it for what it is. When Hamas kills innocent folk, I'm highly critical of them. People, well, that's resistance and that's part of the anti-colonial struggle. I understand that. I'm anti-colonial and anti-imperialist, but I also have a sense of morality. So I'm with the ANC. You attack property, you attack combatants and soldiers. You don't kill innocent people across the board. And I'm very explicit about that. But I'm still anti-imperialist, and I'm still very much concerned with how we end the siege, end the occupation, which was the very source of it. And of course, ceasefire was the minimum, the least that we can do. And then the exchange of hostages for political prisoners, it was almost 7,000 of them, Palestinian political prisoners. And they say, what about 242, I think, Israeli brothers and sisters and siblings who are hostages? So it's a question of really trying to take a strong moral stance, a strong moral witness in a context in which you have to have solidarity with the oppressed folk who have been occupied and dominated, dealing with ethnic cleansing for the last 76 years. But it's a complicated situation because you see, Jewish brothers and sisters, as you know, have been terrorized and traumatized and hated for 2,000 years. And that's real. That's very real. So there's very deep propensity toward paranoia, distrust, being in the world all by oneself, because that has often been the case for Jewish brothers and sisters for 2,000 years. And so when you've been underdogs that long and you find yourself now terrorizing Palestinians, traumatizing Palestinians, you've got an underdog sensibility, but you're an overdog in your relation to the American empire, which is the top dog of the whole planet. Right. And so the question becomes, how do you hold on to a common sense of humanity while telling the truth about the structural and institutional realities of Nakba? We can go from 48 all the way to the present moment, and then having the United States government. And this is a Martin Luther King-like moment when King said, my own government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. I have to make a moral stand. And he goes from what? 75% approval dropped down to 15 to 20 overnight. Even a majority of black folk turned against him. 52% of black folk were against him when he made that statement, you see. But he had to take a moral stand. And I think so it is today in terms of our very precious Palestinians who feel as if they are in the world all by themselves with the Israeli Defense Forces engaging in indescribably barbaric attack and genocidal assault on them, not just in hospitals. 43 hospitals are already blown up.
Right.
43 mosques, 3 churches, and a number of hospitals already blown up. You know what I mean? So that, this argument about the human shield, I think it is just empty. I think that there's a sense of revenge. There's a sense of having one's prowess being humiliated by the failure of an Israeli intelligence, and you just unleash the worst of humanity, and it's inside all of us. And what is the worst? Hatred, revenge, greed, no accountability, no answerability, no responsibility. And unfortunately, the United States allows the Israeli government to get away with these kinds of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and now a crime of genocide. And the impact on the United States now is very deep, though, man. You mentioned the student campuses, but it's everywhere you go. It's in the airports, it's in the grocery stores, it's on the streets, and so forth and so on. And when you unleash this kind of ugly logic, it takes on a life of its own. You know what I mean? That you yourself could be attacked, and you take a moral and spiritual stand against genocide, but it's just at that point it just becomes anti-Jewish hatred. Well, you see, that's evil too. That's wrong too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But it begins to take on a life of its own, in the same way that so many of our precious Palestinians are attacked as if they're in the vanguard of Hamas. Well, you got a whole vast majority of Palestinians who are have their own critiques of Hamas, in terms of Hamas's torturing of other Palestinians, Hamas's targeting dissenting Palestinians. But Hamas is part of the community. There's no doubt about that. And they're part of the resistance. There's no doubt about that. They're the militant wing of it. But Fatah's, the PLO, is different. And then you've got nonviolent Palestinians that I've had wonderful relations with. That's why PDS was so very important, a nonviolent form of resistance, where there must be resistance against occupations and against domination. The question is, what forms does it take? And it's these are very, very treacherous terrains upon which we find ourselves, so brother. But I salute you for really having the moral courage to try to hold on.
I want to read this quote. It's actually from the first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. You won't see this on CNN. Quote, if I were an Arab leader, I would never sign an agreement with Israel. It is normal. We have taken their country. It is true God promised it to us, but how could that interest them? Our God is not theirs. There has been anti-Semitism, the Nazis, Hitler, Auschwitz, but was that their fault? They see but one thing: we have come and we have stolen their country. Why would they accept that? That's the original, founder of Israel, the first prime minister. You're right. We could go back 48. We could go back well beyond that. Obviously, we're not expecting or asking for every Israeli to leave, much less that we would ask every one of us to leave, because we're also occupiers here.
We are settlers on indigenous peoples' lands. That's right.
But my question is, let's say, for argument's sake, we could get somebody like you in there as president. We know about the military-industrial complex, and we know about the Jewish lobby, AIPAC, who apparently is now pledging $100 million to take out the squad out of Congress. How do you even begin to approach this as president when this is such a sacred cow in America that it has become, strangely enough and ridiculously enough, anti-Semitic just to criticize Israel? They don't call you anti-Semitic to criticize America. So why would it be anti-Semitic to criticize Israel? Why would it be anti-Arab to criticize Saudi Arabia? It's nonsense.
Right. That's right. But as you know, there's so much nonsense in barbaric moments, and truth and morality are casualties. But one thing I think is that it's very important first to tell the story of the struggles within the settler colonial experiment called Israel. That when Einstein, Judah Magnus, Ahakaham, Martin Buber, and a host of others said, of course there's people here. Quit lying. Don't say it's a land with no people. There's people here. They've been removed. How do we create a context of coexistence rather than domination? And Jabotinsky is the leader that calls for domination and even expulsion and annihilation. Well, that is the legacy that is dominant right now in Israel. Netanyahu's father was an assistant for Jabotinsky. So that's a particular tradition. Einstein's tradition, it goes all the way to Chomsky. Noam Chomsky goes all the way to Norman Finkelstein and goes all the way to Stanley Aronowitz. You've got these powerful, courageous Jewish voices that are saying there will never be what our precious Jewish brothers and sisters were looking for after the Holocaust, after the Shoah, after the catastrophe for Jews in Europe, which was a European affair. They were looking for security, safety, and dignity, and then maybe some prosperity. Well, you see, for me, Jewish security, Jewish dignity, and Jewish safety are non-negotiable. Of course you have to have that, but you can't have it if it's on the back of precious Palestinians, because I want Palestinian safety, Palestinian security, Palestinian dignity. When I saw that precious baby in your segment there, and I've been saying now for 40 years, Edward Said and I used to travel all around New York, if not the country. I'd always begin with the Palestinian baby has the same value as the Israeli baby. Both babies are precious, and a black and a white and an indigenous and a brown, they all have the same value. I'm a humanist to the end, period. That's non-negotiable too. So if you have Palestinian and Jewish security, safety, dignity, equality as non-negotiable, how then do you approach this situation in telling the truth about occupation, domination, and at the same time telling the truth about a long history of anti-Jewish hatred? That's not just Hitler, it goes all the way back to Martin Luther. It's not just Martin Luther, it goes all the way back to the beginning of Christianity, which is my own tradition, and the Christian tradition playing such a fundamental role in trashing, degrading, and demeaning Jews. And then at the same time, those same exact persons trying to get out of Jew-hating Europe create themselves a settler colonial experience. It's like the persecuted English trying to get away from ugly violation of their rights coming to the United States. It's like black people going to Liberia and subordinating indigenous Liberians in the name of their black version of liberty, Liberia, Monrovia, after James Monroe. And Australia, we've seen this is a human thing. And it's very important in such moments for us to be very, very clear about the viciousness and the barbarity of the forms of domination and occupation, and at the same time, trying to be true to some sense of common humanity so that we don't end up with just massive slaughters across the board. Now, 1,200, precious 1,200 Jewish brothers and sisters slaughtered. Well, you see, to me, they're still innocent. No, settlers are not innocent. Well, we got to argue about that. I don't agree with that. But then you got 14,000 Palestinians already, thousands and thousands of Palestinians who had been killed going back to the 1940s or so. But the babies, 550 in 2014, killed in 50 days. Not one word from the Democratic Party. Not one word from the Republican Party. Hardly any word from the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC. Oh, you mean to tell me that the establishments in both parties are willing to turn away from that level of barbarity? Who are we dealing with here?
Right.
You see what I mean? I'm sorry to go on and on about this, but this really is a line in the sand. And I must say this holds for black leadership too. Where are the black voices? Where's the legacy of Martin King? Where's the legacy of Ella Baker? I mean, Van Jones founded the Ella Baker Center.
And
now I see him up there.
Hakeem Jeffries was leading the transportation for congressional members to go to the rally yesterday.
Oh, yes. He's there singing with Van Jones and the others. And I mean, they've got a right to be wrong, but they need to be called out. If they can't say a word when genocide's taking place, then what in the world is going on? Now, we do know, when it comes to black organizations, APEC and Anti-Defamation League and so forth have always been highly influential in terms of them trying to shape and reshape the discourse in the black community about the Middle East. Bakari Sellers as a student body president at Morehouse.
Right.
APEC takes him to Israel and shows him X and Y. He's got a right to be wrong, but we got to tell the truth. But if we reach a level where even some of the most so-called progressive black folk or progressive non-black folk can't tell the truth about genocide, then we're really in a nadir or in a low place. And that's one reason why I raise my voice even higher, even more intensely. And I've raised it as high as I could. Why? Because somebody's got to keep alive the legacy of Martin King and Malcolm and the others.
Right.
You can't have this massive accommodation to genocidal attacks and so forth.
I know you and Senator Sanders, you're open about your disagreements from time to time. He's been outspoken on the campaign trail and his life story. He's lost, a lot of his family in the Holocaust, tragically. But he's also gotten pushback. He has called on a pause, a humanitarian pause, but not a ceasefire. Have you spoken to him about that? And what are your thoughts, not just with Bernie, but other people that you agree with on a lot of these issues on this? Does not seem he is on board with a ceasefire.
No, it's true. I mean, my dear brother Bernie and I, we had wonderful, very intense debates during the campaign about the Middle East, because he was one of the most outspoken in terms of critique of the right-wing government, the neo-fascism that's running things right now in Israel. He's always been critical of Netanyahu, but he was critical of my supporting BDS, and we'd have our arguments back and forth. But I think it's very sad that the most he can call for is a pause. Genocidal process is going on, and you calling for a pause, and that gets vetoed by your president and by your UN ambassador. You say, Brother Bernie, man, this is reaching the point where it's getting pathetic now, man. If the pause is the best you can come up with, given this situation, then this is getting pretty pathetic. And of course, it's always important for me to flip it, because I believe the golden rule really sits at the center of this, Brother Jordan, that if there were a Palestinian occupation, domination of precious Jewish brothers and sisters, if in fact 4,700 precious Jewish babies have been killed in 2 months, over 11,000 precious Jewish brothers and sisters and siblings killed by Palestinians or even by Arabs, believe me, the U.S. government would be supporting the Jewish version of Hamas.
Yeah,
they would
absolutely
be heroes. Pick up those guns, fight back, fight like George Washington, fight like Thomas Jefferson. And for me, I don't mind picking up the gun because I'm not a pacifist. I just don't like killing innocent people.
Right.
I believe in killing combatants and soldiers. I believe in you got to blow up some buildings the way Mandela did. You do that. But the ANC still remains for me in many ways a grand example of that. Now, a lot of people come at me for that. Oh, Brother West, why are you talking about innocent folks? Everybody's complicit as well. I don't go that far. I don't believe that John Brown and Nat Turner should have killed innocent white kids.
Right.
Under slavery. But I support their resistance. I support the spirit of resistance. I just think it went too far.
Right.
And so in that sense, I'm just trying not to be pure. I'm not pure. I've got a lot of gangster in me. I always say that. I got a whole lot of gangster in me, though, brother. But I'm trying to hold on to some sense of morality and common humanity.
Yeah. Let me.
I'm very profoundly disappointed, not just in Brother Bernie, but in the whole wave of so-called progressives who are either running scared from APEC and the Anti-Defamation League or sincerely believe but that by calling for a pause vetoed by their own government, which still enables the genocidal attacks to go on and on and on, that's going to in any way produce what they want. As these genocidal attacks continue, things are going to get not just worse and worse for the precious Palestinians, but for the whole world situation as we move toward a World War III.
Right. I want to move on because I know you don't have that much time today.
No, but I'm glad you're taking some time on this, because this is
it's very important. Yeah,
it really is, though, man. And now the student groups are getting banned, and so I'm going back. I'm in California now. I'm going back to New York because I want to stand with those students. I believe in free speech. I believe I'm against canceling people. I'm against censorship.
You also have, New York Governor Kathy Hochul. They're talking about new committees or new programs to eradicate hate speech online. You're seeing this elsewhere. I mean, this is kind of 1984 Orwell kind of stuff. Yeah, I would love to get rid of hate speech, but we can't, we can't start a nanny state where we're censoring everything on the internet and beyond under the guise of hate speech, because that's going to then come on to us.
That's exact. And the left, we will be the major targets of it. And any substantive critique of Israeli barbarity will be viewed as hate speech. It'd be redefined. This is anti-Semitic if you believe, in fact, that a Jewish state somehow is not subject to substantive critique, or even if you believe in a secular state for both Jews and Palestinians. All of a sudden now you're in the vanguard of the hate groups. You said, oh, wow, I thought that secular states were actually very positive things given the history of repression and the history of authoritarianism with white supremacist states, any other supremacist, Jewish supremacist states, male supremacist states, across the board. Well, we need to have a conversation about this. No, you're just a hater. You need to be suppressed. You need to lose your job, lose your livelihood, lose your status. Well, these are the days in which we test our souls, oh brother, very much so.
I want to talk about a much softer version of resistance. There's a lot of people that I'm hearing are resisting you and Jill Stein running separately. Obviously, you initially were running for the Green Party nomination. You switched to an independent. Dr. Stein, who ran a good campaign in 2016, is now running Green Party. Obviously, it's an uphill climb, whether you're Green Party or independent, running to try and make a dent. But a lot of people, including people watching now, feel like, why not join together rather than siphoning off those limited votes? I know you're a jazz man. Have you talked to Dr. Stein at all? And is there the potential of, whether it's back in the Green Party or in another way, of you two joining forces?
No, I don't see it, though. I was surprised that she actually announced, because, as you know, it was just a few months ago. She was interim campaign manager. This was the right candidate. We've got to all get behind Brother West. This is a historic moment and so forth. And then when I decided to go independent, it looked as if it was much more a commitment to the party, a commitment to the Green Party, than the particular vision that I was after. You see, I'm not convinced that the Green Party is the primary institutional vehicle for a mass-based campaign. I think it's proven over time it's just not a mass-based party. And over again, it's been unable to convince the masses of folk that people ought to go their way. By masses of folk, I'm talking about Black folk, poor people, working people, brown people, indigenous people, and so forth. And so I'm still fundamentally committed to a mass-based campaign, but the party, for me, in many ways, is much more of an obstacle. I discovered that by working in the party. And so, no, I don't envision at all being on the same ticket as Sister Jill. Now, what I would say is this, though, too, which is very important, and that is that the voices raised can be a positive thing. There's no doubt about that. You know, the voices raised can be very positive. That's true for Sister Claudia de la Cruz. I mean, I have great respect for the voices raised in that regard. But this talk about, well, but the Green Party's got all of these ballot access, easy access to these 17 states and so forth, which is, significant, but it's just too utilitarian. It doesn't have the larger visionary and what would be the right word? Almost immeasurable dimension. You see, that we're going to have a good 35 states of 40 by the time we go. 25 states, low-hanging fruit.
It sounds like you're more. It sounds like you're more focused on the movement rather than the mechanism.
That's I think that's fair. I think that's very, very fair. Or at least I'm concerned about the mechanism. It's just that it's harder for me to have to create the mechanism. But the Green Party as the mechanism, I'm convinced, is not the one for me. It's just one for me. Now, if Sister Jill wants to do that, that's fine. That's fine.
Let me ask you about your campaign specifically in the swing states right now. You're hovering around 1% to 2%. You haven't really started an official campaign where you're rallies and things like that. But I'm looking at these polls, Colin, if we could pull it up. I mean, this New York Times poll where Biden is losing significantly to the 4-time indicted, I would think we would agree, gangsta former president
absolutely.
Trump. I mean, he's down by 11 in Nevada, 5 in Arizona, 4 in Pennsylvania, 6 in Georgia, Michigan, 5, on and on. And it's not just that he's down. I mean, his numbers are in the tank among young people.
That's right.
22% of black voters polled in these states supported Trump, which I found. I mean, listen, black voters, just like white voters, they could support whoever they want, but that did indeed surprise me. They keep, we heard months that you're the spoiler. I mean, I'm looking at these numbers. You got the Biden Politico writing about how this is going to be a, quote, Rose Garden campaign, insinuating Biden does not have the stamina to campaign.
That's right.
Is he the spoiler?
And we got to keep in mind, my brother, that even though it looks as if Trump is going to be the Republican Party candidate, there's a chance that he could be on the way to jail. There's a chance that RFK Jr., given the newness and the novelty right now, of making the shift from a party he said he would never leave. And I got love for my brother in my own way and in his own way. But when people find out he is an enabler of genocide too, he's going to have to come to terms with that. His defense of what he calls free market capitalism. What do you mean, brother RFK? You got a wonderful critique of corporate power, and I resonate with it. But what do you mean? All of these things become more and more public, become more and more visible. And so we're in real time. That's part of what it is to be jazz-like too. You see, I'm not in any way overwhelmed by or excessively worried about the moment. One reason why we've held off on our massive rallies is that takes a lot of money. We'd rather spend time with the ballot assets, with the volunteers on the ground. We got almost 15,000 volunteers. I'd rather spend time making sure that the timing is such that when we do hit the ground and when we do begin to surface, it's at the right time. See, I don't want high polls now and I got a whole year to go. No. I want to peak November 2024.
And my last question, because I know you got to go. I mean, it seems to me that Biden's problems right now, there's plenty to put on his lap and blame him for. But this neoliberal project has been going on for 40 years. He's been a big player. But I look at these numbers, specifically on the economy. It seems to me that the old tricks that used to work for the Democratic Party, the media, of just citing low unemployment, citing GDP,
That's
citing these, fairy dust numbers that don't take into account, 64% of people are working paycheck to paycheck. How many are working more than one job? Rationing medicine, making tough choices between, necessities. It seems like that kind of neoliberal bubble is starting to pop a bit. Your thoughts?
You are absolutely right about that, though, brother. And of course, the reality was always there. We just had the window dressing that was hiding and concealing it. But most importantly, though, I think in our particular historical moment, you tell me what you think, my brother, that very much like the 60s, foreign affairs, American imperial policies is moving more and more to the center of the public conversation. You simply cannot talk about domestic policy without talking about military adventurism and its relation to climate catastrophe, with the U.S. military being the major institutional producer of greenhouse emissions and fossil fuel, consumer fossil fuel, and so forth. See, what is happening is the American empire is reaching a moment now where its relation to other nations, its relation to the global south, its relations to those we used to call the third world, which is simply where the precious vast majority of human beings live. The America itself has been living in an imperial bubble for a long time. And the bubble you talked about that is now popping more and more, it's on the international stage. And if you don't have leaders, spokespersons, movements, forces, and figures that can tell the story to the American people with a sense of morality and spirituality that has to do with the role of the American empire vis-a-vis the world, Middle East, Asia, China, Latin America, Ukraine, Russia, and then the wealth inequality on the inside, and then the spiritual emptiness on the inside, and then the polarization with hatred and revenge on the inside. And we've talked before, Trump leading us towards Civil War #2, Biden leading us toward World War III, be it Russia or China or the Middle East. Those realities now are more and more inescapable. And that's one of the reasons why my campaign ain't no joke, brother. That's one of the reasons why what I'm bringing to this is very distinctive. It's very, very different. And in some ways, it's very unique. And it also comes from a hated and terrorized and traumatized people from the inside of the American empire, Black people ourselves. And that's part of the greatness of the legacy of Martin King. And that's why I'm tied to that legacy until the day I die.
And before you go, could you just tell people who I'm sure understand the financial aspects, what can they expect in the coming weeks, months from your campaign? You said you have 15 or 50,000 volunteers?
15.
15,000 volunteers.
15,000, absolutely. And you see, as you know, we can't even come out of the gate for the most part until January. The first state we can come out of the gate is Utah, where we're headed to.
Okay.
And we really come out of the gate in January because they put time limits in terms of when you can begin the signatures or when you can pay the $500, let's say in Louisiana and so forth. All these different states, of course, have different criteria and different requirements. But right now, we're zeroing in on the fundraising and the ballot access. Now, you're kind enough, and so many others, Brother Tim Black and others, been very, very kind in terms of allowing me to be on TV, and corporate media has been very kind. I give them credit. And I say exactly the same thing on your show, as I say on Sean Hannity's show, as I say on Chris Cuomo's show, as I say on Anderson Cooper's show. But what I need more than anything else now is to connect the troops on the ground with the flow of the money, because to have huge rallies and pay tens and tens of thousands of dollars for a huge rally for one moment, that's not the way I proceed, though, brother. No, when you're traveling with your jazz band, you all in that bus together. Duke Ellington and Count Basie is sitting right next to the brother playing tuba. He doesn't have no big Rolls Royce in the front. No. This is the people's campaign. We are all in it together. And I can tell you, I always enjoy being with you, though, brother, because you really have you and Tim Black and a few others you all really do have an honesty, a courage, a sincerity, and integrity that I deeply resonate with, person to person, brother to brother. And you, of course, an exemplary journalist, and me just trying to be out here telling some truths and seeking some justice.
I appreciate that. And I'm sure, if people want to find out more, if they want to help financially, it's CornelWest2024.com, CornelWest2024.com. Thanks for taking the time. We'll stay in touch and let us know if you're going to be on the East Coast with these students protesting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Salute you, though, brother. Indeed.
All right.
Bless your loved ones, man. Bless your loved ones.
You too. Take care.
All right.
So that was Dr. Cornel West. Sometimes we've been able to go longer, but he only had about a half hour, 40 minutes. So I got him for longer today. I think we got a lot out of Dr. West. We'll cut that up into a few other clips so we can post it on social media. But I think he makes a lot of valid points. Obviously, the things he's saying on Israel and Gaza, he's been saying consistently for decades. So he's not new to this. But I do think, right now, if you look at polls, two people that are big proponents of a third party candidate or an independent candidacy, you might feel dejected because right now the polls show of the third party or independent candidates, RFK Jr. is doing the best with Cornel West far behind. Obviously, Jill Stein just jumped in. But I think, I've covered politics for over a decade. This will be my third presidential campaign. I think this campaign and this election, more so than anyone I've ever covered, the amount that could change even in a few months. And remember this. I mean, this will live, this video. I think what could change from now in November to even February or March will shock us. And what I mean by that is, listen, I don't have any inside information, but does anyone think it's out of the question that Joe Biden, if the polls remain what they are and presumably get worse for him, that he might not resign or announce he's not running again for his own political legacy? And so he's not completely shamed and embarrassed with a landslide defeat, which it's not just one poll. It's not just the New York Times Siena poll showing he is significantly behind and would lose if the election were held today. Politico just did a survey with 15,000 people they spoke with. Biden would lose if the election were held today in a head-to-head matchup without RFK and Cornel West or Jill Stein. Just head-to-head, he would lose. I would dare to argue, do I think that the Democratic Party prioritizes winning over keeping their corporate party running? I think they'd much rather lose and keep the money flowing and the corruption flowing. However, I do think that they would, if they could, do a respectful lobbying campaign to get Biden to step aside. And that might be led by Obama and Obama world, which is one and the same of Biden world. So don't think it's out of the question that Biden might step aside, which then creates a clusterfuck, because I do not think the DNC technically, optically might make it seem like we're going to back Kamala Harris, but make no mistake, Vice President Harris, make no mistake, if Biden steps aside, it's a Hunger Games from there, a political Hunger Game. Secondly, I got to be honest, I don't think RFK's numbers are going to hold. I think what Cornel West said was very accurate. I think Kennedy right now, a lot of his numbers have to do with his last name. I also think a lot of his numbers have to do with he has suddenly adopted a lot of more, I would say, right-wing positions or positions that tend to be favorable among right-wingers. But for Democrats who might be leaning more towards RFK now, he has some Democrats that have gone his way. Right now, RFK is pulling more from Trump. Wait till the RNC and the Republicans unleash the hounds of hell on RFK, because there is a good 20, 30 years of loony, conspiratorial, batshit craziness not just about vaccines or 5G or any of that shit, about a lot of other stuff that RFK Jr. has been pushing for the last 20, 30 years. There's also a lot of, I would say, suspect things having to do with his foundation and financial things having to do with his foundation. You might say, Jordan, people don't care about conspiracy theories. I do think people care about conspiracy theories if they are borderline, if they dip into dangerous territory when it comes to health, when it comes to children's health. And he hasn't really had a glove laid on him on those things other than, being called an anti-vax person. The RNC and probably the DNC will start carpet bombing the airwaves with ads showing RFK as frankly a bit loony, in my opinion. You might support him for other reasons, and the conspiracy stuff doesn't matter to you, but to independent voters, to more traditional Republican and Democratic voters, it might matter. Trump, I've been saying this for a long time. I do not think it is out of the question that Trump drops out. It really is a matter of timing. At the moment, we know that the porn star trial is gonna happen, I believe, in March. I don't really think that one matters. That's the Stormy Daniels thing. Put that aside. And yes, we're talking about a porn star thing, and I'm just normally saying that because it's Trump, and what's abnormal is now normal. When it comes to the election, trying to overcome the election in January 6th, that trial is very likely to start, I believe, by May. Now, even if he was convicted, he does have the right to appeal. But if you grew up in New York, if you followed Donald Trump and the whole Trump media tabloid circus, you know that as much of a megalomaniac and Looney Tune he is, if there's one thing Donald Trump will not allow, in my opinion, it's him going behind bars. I think he would sooner off himself than be locked up. So to me, if his lawyers tell him you're going to lose, sure, we could appeal, but you're going to face jail time. I think it's possible that he would make a deal for some slap on the wrist, long probation, record fine, obviously dropping out of the presidential race, and then just play it up that, it was the deep state who took us down and took down our movement. The case that he, at the moment, is almost definitely going to lose is the case about the classified documents. It is just very black and white, whether you're a Trump supporter or not. It is what it is. To the idiots on YouTube who say it's all a witch hunt and, he's being targeted, I guarantee you they didn't read any of the indictments against him, because if you read the indictments and you read the proof, and I don't just lazily believe what the government tells me, I read it, and it would be a crime if they're just making up evidence. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming that he stole national security documents with the identities of spies, which the CIA and the military-industrial complex does not look so kindly on, documents about nuclear programs that he instructed his underlings to hide the documents, move the boxes. He lied to his lawyer. That, I think they are pushing very hard to delay that trial till after the election, because that one, his lawyers know, poses the most risk. There's also a wild card here. The Georgia case in specific, he cannot pardon himself as president if convicted in the Georgia case. A president can't pardon himself on a state crime. It's kind of a gray area as far as federal crimes. Technically, legal scholars have said he probably could try to pardon himself over the January 6th case if convicted, over the classified documents if convicted, if he wins re-election. He cannot pardon himself over the Georgia case, and that case, the prosecutor is pushing very, very hard to start that trial before before the election. So you have potentially 2 criminal trials, not the porn star trial, 2 criminal trials that could start before the general election period even begins with potential convictions. Trump might be doing well in the polls and he might be able to appeal, but I think at a certain point, his lawyers are going to tell him, hey, you're going to lose. And if we don't make a deal, you're facing the rest of your life in prison. I know Trumpers don't want to hear that. And I know people who just reflexively hate the Democratic Party. And because they reflexively hate the Democratic Party, they kind of are looking the other way at Trump. But remember, for a lot of these crimes, anyone else would have already been thrown in jail, particularly on the classified documents. Trump has not faced the same level of punishment because he was a former president. So, again, I don't think it's a definite, as Dr. West said, that Biden is going to remain in the race. Frankly, the more time goes, he does not look well. I don't say that in a derogatory way. I just say that because I have eyes and ears. He doesn't look well, the president. And he's 80 years old. I'm 37, and I don't know if I could do the job of a president. And with Trump. So this thing is wide open. I don't say that to give you false hope that Cornel West can win the presidency or Jill Stein can win the presidency. But I do think this is a lot more open than we think. Inflation, even though they're saying, oh, the numbers are down, people don't feel that because groceries are still very expensive. Your electric bill is very expensive. Utilities are very expensive. Housing is still through the roof. And that's been a 20-year inflation. It's called gentrification, i.e. economic terrorism. I don't like the term gentrification. I say economic terrorism because that's what it is. So I think this is wide open. But, obviously I'm a fan of Dr. West, but let's keep it real. He's going to have to get out there sooner than later because interviews will only get you so far. If you want to start a movement, you got to show a movement. And that starts, I think, part of Bernie's underdog campaign that really shocked the world in 2016 and 2020 were those massive rallies, were the energy in the air, the spirit in the air, the love in the air, the hope in the air. Of course, it costs money. I understand what he's saying. But, he's going to have to do that if he wants to excite more than just the online community. So we'll cut those interviews up. If you missed our coverage of the protest at Columbia University that happened earlier today in support of Palestinians and a demand for a ceasefire, that's up on the channel. Go watch that. We have other protests that we've been covering. We covered a protest in support of Palestinians that were consisted of parents with their children the other day. That's up on the channel. That was really powerful. We've covered a lot of, John Farina has covered a lot of the ceasefire now protests. I also have an interview coming up tomorrow with a General Motors worker. The UAW General Motors vote right now is kind of iffy. At the moment, it has 55% approval among General Motors workers, but there's still more plants that have to vote on the tentative agreement. We should know soon if the tentative agreement will pass among General Motors. It looks like it's going to pass more by a wider margin among Ford workers and Stellantis, but GM is a lot closer. I have an interview coming up tomorrow with a worker who voted no, and I thought the reasons were really, really interesting. So thank you so much for watching. If you are new here, subscribe to this channel. We just passed 160,000 subscribers. So thank you to everybody who's been subscribing lately. As far as I know, we are the only independent, let me repeat, independent outlet that is constantly on the ground covering the workers' strikes. We covered the UAW strike for the first 25 days on the road. It cost us a lot of money thanks to you supporting us as members. You can become a member for $5 to $10 a month. That's statuscoup.com/join. A lot of other outlets just bloviate out of their assholes from a comfy studio. We're out there covering protests. We're out there covering strikes, covering environmental genocide in East Palestine, in Flint, and elsewhere. And we want to continue. We want to go into 2021 strong, staying out on the road. Myself, John Farina, Lewis, Ron Placone, covered parts of the UAW strike for us in Michigan. Tina Desiree Berg, who does a great job for us. But we need your support. If you're not yet a member, I know there's a lot of expenses and times are tough for everyone, and you got holiday spending. $5 a month equals 16 cents a day. Let me repeat. For 16 cents a day, you could support actual living, breathing, independent, not corporate funded or edgy corporate funded outlets. Independent, on the ground journalism. We don't take a dollar from the big banks, the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, the military industrial complex, APEC, General Motors, Ford. None of them. Our funding comes from you, the people. Thank you so much. StatusCoup.com/join. We'll see you back here tomorrow.